Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Overwatch Weekly. Not a ton of stuff to talk about today, so let's just jump into it. The first thing is that Echo's cosmetic progression, her cosmetic items, have all been added to the game. You can click the link in the description to see my video on them. I'll link it in the cards as well. And it should be linked at the end of the video as well. So if you want to check that out, you can check that out. The next thing is that Overwatch has a little April Fool's joke prank thing in game. And it's that everyone and everything with eyes has googly eyes. And that's it. That's the whole thing. And it's fantastic, and I love it. And I think that you need to check it out if you haven't seen it yet. I don't know what else to say about it. It's wonderful, it's lovely, and it's beautiful. So now let's get to the main story I want to talk about for the majority of this video. This comes from the Overwatch League. It is an article titled Schedule for Weeks 9 through 10 and an update on homestands. So I'm going to read you the entire article. I won't read you the schedule. I'll just read you the article, and then I want to talk about a couple things. Following a successful weekend of holding online matches for the first time, the Overwatch League is now announcing the schedule for Weeks 9 through 10. Given the ongoing global health situation and in discussion with all our teams, we are officially shifting the remaining regular season homestand events for weeks 14 through 27 to a fully online competition and broadcast format. The league will continue to release future match schedules as soon as they're available. Additional details about playoffs and grand finals will be released at a later time. Players, teams, staff, and production personnel may continue to compete and work from locations of their choosing, safely, without any fan attendance, travel, or unnecessary interpersonal contact, and in accordance with current health and safety recommendations and governmental mandates. All matches will be broadcast live and available on demand on our YouTube channel. For additional details on how online matches will operate and maintain competitive integrity, they have a link for that. The Overwatch League was built to deliver season after season of live, city-based events in front of our amazing fans. While we are collectively facing an incredibly challenging time, we hope to get back to live events before the 2020 season concludes, and we are working hand in hand with all our teams to make this happen as soon as it's safe and logistically feasible. So the big thing that obviously is of note here is that there are no more homestands, right? Homestands are canceled for the remainder of the season. But with the little caveat at the end that they're canceled until further notice, or they're canceled until we can make them no longer canceled. And I think that that's really the big thing to take away here, is that they, for now, are not going to have them. But if they can make it where they can have some back again, then they will. So we have to kind of see what happens here for the rest of the season. And obviously, I'm not upset with the Overwatch League for canceling the in-person matches or for moving the entire rest of the season online. The thing is that there's just a problem, and this is something that the Plat Chat guys talked about last week in their podcast, I believe, or this week or the week before that. But if you have these regions, right, where the teams are just playing within their regions, the issue that comes up with playoffs is, one, how do you even do playoffs if teams can't really travel? If you have Shanghai playing Philadelphia in the playoffs, that's going to be huge latency. There's going to be a massive issue there with latency problems. So, for me personally, I look at that and I go, well, that's a problem that will have to be solved if that's how playoffs is working. But two, you also have the issue of, you have these regions, right? Teams are just going to play the same teams how many times, right? Each team is supposed to play 28 matches, but if you've played 28 matches where you've only ever played 3 or 4 other teams in those matches, that's somewhat troublesome and problematic. It's not that entertaining if you just see the same teams play over and over and over and over again, because eventually they're going to figure each other out, and you're going to see mostly the same results every week. Now, with hero pools, that changes a little bit because, this past weekend we saw Shanghai lose to the Chengdu Hunters. Well, they play again this weekend, and Chengdu won't have access to Wrecking Ball, so that changes things significantly, and that makes the match very, 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 very different. So it's interesting in that regard to see what the teams will have to kind of do to change things up, all that kind of stuff. But I think it's really, really odd in a way to see teams have to play the same teams the entire season. And I hope that eventually we get to a point where the teams are able to travel and play against each other again. Because if not, I think we're going to have to see a major change to the way playoffs are done. Because we're not going to see a ton of, major cross-conference play if this keeps up. Now, I do want to mention that there are a couple of teams who are playing matches that I wouldn't necessarily expect them to. Just meaning that they're playing against teams who are out of their region, or who were originally out of their region. If you go to week 10, there's a couple of interesting matches. The Vancouver Titans play both the Guangzhou Charge and the Chengdu Hunters. Now, that is not that weird, as the Vancouver Titans have moved to Korea, so because they're in Korea now, it makes sense. This is a team that you would expect to see playing against these Chinese teams because they have moved into that region. They moved into Korea, where I believe the Guangzhou Charge are in Korea, at least. So that's not that weird. The Washington Justice play against the Dallas Fuel, which, while they're both in the U.S., the Dallas Fuel are in the Pacific group. But because of, I guess, Dallas's location in the middle of the country, they have a bit more ability to play some of these other teams on the East Coast, whereas the Houston Outlaws may also have some of the ability to play teams on the West Coast. It's interesting. Obviously, the schedule is going to be weird. Some teams aren't scheduled to play any matches in the next 2 weekends. The New York Excelsior, London Spitfire have no matches coming up. I don't believe the Florida Mayhem do either. So they're really putting a focus, seemingly, on getting some of these Pacific matches out of the way. In week 9, let's see, you have 10 matches, and 3 of them are Atlantic matchups. Toronto versus Washington, and then Houston versus Paris, and Philadelphia versus Washington. And then you have, in week 10 matches again. But that week, it's a little different. You have 5 matches for the Atlantic Conference. So, it's a little different. So, it'll be interesting to see what goes on. But I do have some concerns about the fact that they're moving online, that the season itself is going to be strange. And it's part of why I think that the big postseason event should be very different. The Plat Chat was kind of talking about the idea of just every team makes the playoffs, right? Because the regular season this season is not going to really matter, just because of the situation at hand. Like, there's really no way to look at this regular season and be like, it's going to tell you everything, because most likely teams are not going to play everybody. Now, we know that the grand finals would be taking place sometime in late September. Most likely. That's when it happened last year. I believe that's when it was scheduled to happen. And with that being the case, I think it's important to look and say there's a possibility that we could get to the point where by then teams are able to play in front of an audience, or they're able to travel at least, and still play online but travel. But they're still most likely not going to play against every team. Now, maybe they will. Who knows? But most likely teams aren't going to play against every single team in the league. So I think it's super important to try to get in as many of those matches as possible for some of these teams. And if it gets to a point where teams don't play everybody, I think it should be a 20-team playoff invitational tournament where you seed everybody based on their conference. So you have the Atlantic Conference bracket, Pacific Conference bracket. I think that would be the maybe not the best way to do it. Maybe you just seed it purely based on overall season standings, right? The top 4 teams automatically, end up in a different round, right? So you have a way to kind of do that, or just figure it out where maybe you have like play-in games, or you have a 16-team tournament, but your 20s, your 17 through 20 or 15 through 20, whatever, 14 through 20, something like that. I guess it'd be 15 to 20. Kind of fight for those spots, kind of like a play-in tournament in and of itself, and then you have a 16-team tournament from there, where the top 16 are placed in a bracket, and they just kind of fight to see who moves on. I think that would be an interesting format. I think there's ways to do it, but I think you have to make some changes to the playoffs with the way that the season is going now, and I think that that's super important. But only time will tell at this point in time, so that's what we're going to have to look out for. That's everything I have for you today. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing. Let me know your thoughts on anything in the comments down below. Hope you all have a wonderful week. Hope you all stay safe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.